cybersecurity is not really something about just bits and bytes cybersecurity, but it actually really is about where threats are going to converge, whether they're sort of internet-based threats, cyber threats, if you want, physical threats, and then the sort of disinformation threats, misinformation threats, and the convergence of all of that. That can and is already causing significant societal impact.
Welcome to Unnatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nick Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
This is episode 22. Threat intelligence sits at the crossroads of technology, security, and geopolitics, an industry tasked with identifying risks before they become disasters. As digital threats grow more sophisticated and harder to trace, threat intelligence plays a critical role in protecting companies, individuals, and even entire nations. In this episode, we explore how this field is evolving to meet a rising tide of misinformation, cyber attacks, and invisible conflicts playing out across the globe. Our guest is Christopher Ahlberg. Dr. Christopher Ahlberg is the co-founder and CEO of Recorded Future, the world's largest threat intelligence company, acquired by MasterCard in 2024. Since co-founding the company in 2009, he has played a key role in shaping its growth as a global leader in intelligence-driven security. Previously, he co-founded Spotfire, later acquired by TIBCO. He also serves as chairman of Hult International Business School. Let's go.
Christopher, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for being on Unnatural Selection.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you, Nick.
Likewise. I always start with the same level-setting question for the sake of the listeners so that they understand what field we're actually talking about from your perspective. So in the simplest way possible, what human or societal need do you address, and what is your role in solving it?
Ooh, big questions. I'm a nerd. I usually go to the most simple sort of things, but all right. No, think about it this way. So over the last 25 years, I'll use that time frame, the world have sort of slowly migrated onto the internet. Everything that we do in everyday sort of life is sort of happening on the internet. And the internet has slowly become a reflection of the world. That's sort of step one. Step two, the next 25 years, and uncomfortably so already starting to happen, the world is going to become a reflection of the internet. Whether it's relations between people or business relationships or geopolitical relationships and all the transactions that feed all of this stuff will sort of emerge first on the internet and then migrate onto the physical world. And in that, we end up with a world where cybersecurity is not really something about just bits and bytes cybersecurity, but it actually really is about where threats are going to converge, whether they're sort of internet-based threats, cyber threats, if you want, physical threats. We'll probably come back and talk geopolitics here. Unfortunately, we live in a world where there's a set of wars unfolding as we speak. And then the sort of disinformation threats, misinformation threats, whatever word you prefer, and the convergence of all of that. That can and is to some extent already causing significant societal impact, and we believe that intelligence that can actually extract sort of the signal, if you want, from this somewhat chaotic world that we're watching can be imperative at keeping the West safe, at keeping companies safe, keeping organizations safe, and there's a lot of opportunity in all of that, and I think that's why we're meeting here today to talk.
That's fascinating. And for the sake of those unfamiliar, what exactly is threat intelligence, and why does it matter today more than ever? You mentioned the geopolitical situation. Obviously, with AI coming on board, it's becoming harder and harder to tell truth from fiction. And so, with all of that, how do you define threat intelligence?
So think about it this way. So as I mentioned, the world is sort of and the internet is sort of, I don't know, converging, becoming one. There's like we used to say that the internet was a digital twin of the world. Unfortunately, I think it's sort of like it's one and the same.
It's
So
very
in that,
Matrix-like.
yeah, no, and it's sort of there's a lot of good from that, a lot of cool things we've been able to do, but there's some scary things too. Um, so then you think about what that actually means. There's a lot of goodness, but it also means that bad guys take advantage of this very early on as things got wired up. Um, Spy agencies of various sorts, both among our adversaries, but also ourselves for sure, figured out that you could use electronic means to steal information. What started originally with sort of listening in to phone calls and telegraphing or whatever has sort of obviously become a pretty epic opportunity to steal information from the internet. The other side of the coin, which is actually the much bigger threat, is stealing money of various sorts, and that emerged from stealing outright sort of credit cards and hard cash type stuff into actually ransomwareing stuff, because as infrastructure, internet-based infrastructure became critical, the bad guys figured out that, hey, I'll just lock this stuff up and I'll steal the information of it and threaten to release it. And suddenly I have good impetus to, or good grounds for actually ransoming somebody. So again, what I'm saying here is that there is an enormous opportunity to cause harm, whether it's to steal secrets or steal money. So now what intelligence tries to be helpful about here is can be as simple as saying, I work in industry X and I'm a company that is of, particular size in a particular geography. These things are happening to my neighbors. And my neighbors is not necessarily on the internet who's physically my neighbor. My neighbor can actually be in New Zealand. Uh, but so if something is happening to my neighbors, I probably need to improve my security around something, fix my firewall, improve my endpoints, what have you, that sort of stuff. That's sort of at the tactical level. That can go even more tactical. These are the IP addresses and domains and the sort of the technical data that I see being used to attack companies like myself. Maybe I want to block that stuff. And then the more strategic level where, you know, so this weekend, maybe we'll talk more about this. There's obviously been an enormous amount of fighting between Israel and Iran. We could probably talk for hours about that. And there are cyber implications of this. So right now, pretty much every company of any sort around the world is asking, what is the cyber implications of this conflict between Israel and Iran? And what, if any? But people are asking those sort of more strategic questions. What are the second order implications of such a cyber conflict? So the intelligence here can be sort of from tactical, again, what IP addresses and domains should I block, all the way up to pretty strategic questions. And there's a lot of work to be done to be helpful in that.
So, in order to build up this intelligence, you're obviously mining through like vast amounts of data. Where does Recorded Future gather and process the data from? And what role does AI or machine learning play in transforming that into actionable intelligence?
So first of all, yeah, you need to get all the data. The we started off originally. We got funded by Incutel at the time, CIA, now probably the broader intelligence community's venture capital arm, and then Google, who sort of invested in the company to sort of build out the core engine around processing what was written on the internet. And then I like to say that every year we've sort of drilled our way further and further into the internet to pick up all kinds of stuff, good signals, bad signals, what have you. And so we'll collect everything from sort of machine written data, human written data, imagery, text, what have you, across a whole set of modalities. And then to your point, we use a lot of techniques to extract signal out of this. And this can be as simple as a piece of text. Xi Jinping is traveling to Moscow tomorrow, or a hacker is asking, does anybody have access to any computing infrastructure at a particular university? I have an exploit that I want to try on their network, something that might be said on a forum or something like that. All the way to like very geeky sort of machine level data. And we take this data and we try to process this and we turn this into our intelligence graph. That we think about this as the comparison to the Google knowledge graph. And it's the largest intelligence graph in the world that connects everything from sort of bad guys to the methods and tools they use to all the way over to the good guys. And puts this in the context of geography and geopolitics and all these sort of things. And then we built in a series of intelligence products on top of that. AI is incredibly important in this. When we got started, it was a lot of natural language processing. Then there was a lot of machine learning type of techniques to look for basically call it trend analysis, anomaly detection, that sort of stuff. And now, so in intelligence, we tend to and have for decades talked about what's called the intelligence cycle. So think about that as you're planning what sort of information do I need to go collect, kind of implying for your original question, what sort of information am I going to process and how are we going to process it as it comes through my door? It can be lots of different kinds of data. You can imagine we get a few things through our door. Burp. Then once you process it, you want to sort of start extracting signal and so on, as I was saying. Burp. Now, the beauty over the last couple of years, and this is probably where the word AI kicks in, the AI cannot just be used to process, but it can be damn used to produce intelligence. So
Mhm.
if I go into Recorded Future and say, get me all the data on I don't know, IRGC locations in Tehran related to, bombings by Israel and get it only from Farsi news sources or get it only from Telegram accounts in Farsi in Tehran. And now, boom, the AI will produce human written, sort of human like, not human written, human like reports. And we used to do that 2 years ago when this popped out, sort of short form mixed up with imagery and everything, and people are amazed. Now we produce damn whole full length, things on a daily basis, hourly basis that just blows people away. Is this written by a machine? Uh, it actually changes. So that whole intelligence cycle that then goes from this collect and process into the writing dissemination part of the intel cycle it really is disrupted by AI here. And we like to joke around here that Sam Altman did everything he did just for us. It's pretty remarkable. Maybe that's not true.
It, yeah, it really is remarkable. When it comes to AI, a lot of people talk about putting guardrails around it and making sure that we protect humanity from it, and we can and can't do certain things. And from my perspective, the genie's out of the bottle. It's more of an arms race at this point, and it's really because you put guardrails around what we can do in the U.S., your adversaries aren't going to follow those guidelines, right? So I really feel like it's kind of a race to see who has the most powerful AI and the biggest protection around some of the threats along with that. And to your point earlier on with life or the internet emulating life and now life emulating the internet, it's kind of scary to think about all of this misinformation that's out there. I deal with it in genomics all the time, but we see it in geopolitics, we see it in local politics, we see it on the internet. Um, and so something like this is obviously as critical as ever and will only continue being ever more critical for us to just be able to build trust in the things that we see, the things that we read, the things that we hear. Given that it is an arms race and you're using very powerful technologies, but so are adversaries using AI to generate stuff. And we just talked about how you collect the data. How do you build trust, or how do you build trust in what you're building at Recorded Future to know that the data you're processing and making decisions on is actually real versus manipulated or fabricated by bad actors using
So,
AI?
so you just asked me 7 questions, just to be
Yeah.
clear here. So I'll try to sort of unpack that. You have to keep me honest on whether I responded to any of
So
all of
focus on the one about the trust and data. How do you make
trust
sure
and
that when you're
data. Trust and data. I'd love to talk about your other point about like what are we doing versus what the adversary is doing, and then the genie out of the bottle. I also think is very important. But trust and data for sure, because to be honest, that is true regardless of AI or not. So first of all, you're a scientist, and the beauty of science is that you measure something, you measure something with a piece of, I don't know, a yardstick or some sort or a scale or whatever that may be. And the good news is the scale may be not perfect. And in fact, no scale is perfect, sort of thing. But we can sort of even measure the error on the scale. We can know when we buy a scale that this is the amount of sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but how good it is or not.
precision? Hmm.
And precision. Uh, so that's number one. Number two then is, and this is important, it's very unlikely that somebody's going to fiddle with our measurements. It's like, if nothing else, we've learned in science over thousands of years, maybe hundreds, to run controlled experiments where we measure multiple times. We do all kinds of different things, and we run one set of things with one scale, and then we run another scale, and we do all kinds of different things to figure out with this. When you deal with, call it intelligence, and it's not just true in sort of cyber stuff. This could be, you can imagine the so Iran tries to. There's a lot of talk right now about, did they run away with the sort of the Fordo nuclear site? Did they run away with the nuclear materials? Blah blah blah. You can imagine the amount of sort of measurement type stuff involved in this here. So now suddenly it's not just about the measurement, but it's like, how much did the adversary actually fiddle with my measurement? And there are very few fields where in science in the world where somebody actually will fiddle with the measurements. I like to say, it was actually not my comment. It was a great guy, Dan Carr, I guess, who originally made this comment about that it was sort of cyber only. I sort of made the point that it was also, you see it in financial markets where people do spoof trades and things like this, where high quantity, high frequency traders will sort of issue fake trades to drive a price up or down before they come in and do their real trades, sort of thing. So think about, those are probably the two of the places in the world where people will deliberately, I was going to say a bad word, but mess with you, sort of thing. So now in that, so that's reality. That's just reality. And if you have a satellite in the sky, you could damn know that the to monitor something, your adversary will figure out that you have a satellite in the sky. They'll figure out that if this is a stationary satellite or one that shows up every 12 hours, given the georotation, whatever. If so, they're going to put out the masking nets over it when it's coming, and all of this sort of stuff is what we're dealing with. So now, from a sourcing point of view, now this here is where it gets tricky. Everybody wants to have the simple answer. There's some good sources and the bad sources. You know, if you're in Cambridge here in the People's Republic of Cambridge, it's very simple. New York Times is a great source. Fox News is a bad source.
Mhm.
If you're in, I don't know, in Kentucky, Fox News is a great source and New York Times is a bad source, sort of thing. And both comments are equally fucked up and dumb. Like
Mhm.
they're just plain dumb.
Biased.
The guys in Cambridge, the guys in Kentucky are dumb
Mhm.
when they're this simplistic about things, because it's not how the world works. And it doesn't help if you start unpacking. We thought, oh, it's great. Let's figure out what journalists are really good, or what journalists are good on what subject matters, and develop this massive ontology of all of that. And I don't think it's you. You actually have to unpack it down to, like, this particular journalist or this particular source, this particular whatever now may be human that we actually collect data from, this particular process on this particular subject matter. So frankly, you just need to have the data, and there's no simple answer of good and bad. That's sort of in the eye of the beholder. So our client, who might be in the US government, is going to have a different view of what's good and bad than the Singaporean government, than what a company in Saudi is going to have. So what we figured out with Recorded Future is that we collect all, quote unquote, all the data, we organize it, and we make it highly queryable so that you can set it up to what matters to you. So from your perspective, whether it's at this sort of strategic level that I talked about or the tactical level, you can create the vernacular that allows you to understand what's good for you. And I think that's sort of been a very important insight here, to sort of avoid the simplicity of this New York Times versus Fox. And it drives me bananas here. That's sort of because we live in a society where is this so dumb. And
Yeah.
given that I'm sitting in Somerville, really want to send a signal to the people around me. You're so dumb with that. The other side is equally dumb, by the way. So
Mhm.
so we have that going on. So creating this sort of opportunity to create a vernacular given what's important, and that's where, could we imagine an AI that actually sorts out more of this? I so here, after the bombings over the weekend, one of the most powerful sort of things to do is to sort of, go into Record Future AI and say, give me the Iranian perspective of what happened over the weekend. Give me the Iranian official news, farce news, press TV, whatever the sort of give me the official Iranian sort of news versus what Iranian Farsi language social media is saying. Tell me where they're diverging. Now I'm asking real questions that actually
Mhm.
allows me to get to real insight rather than this stupid question of like good bad sourcing sort of thing. And and that's I think what somebody who's a real intelligence professional would say is that that's how it's always worked. That you sort of need to understand what sources are good for what subject matters, and at some level, the internet hasn't really changed that. It's just the power that you can actually sit at your desk in Somerville and say, "I want to get the perspective of what's going on in Mozambique right now, and get me the difference from what government sources versus local guys are saying." That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly powerful. Are you allowed to share any of real world scenarios where recorded future intercepted or mitigated some kind of an attack, or is that all
So first
classified?
of all, nobody tells us what to do or not. Like the we don't take direction of anybody at some level. We do have, we it's sort of important to make the point that we're not obliged to any government entity. We're not obliged to anybody. Now we have a lot of customers where we have license agreements with, where obviously we're not going to spill their secrets.
Hmm.
That's so you can imagine you've run companies, and you have a lot of non-disclosure agreements and those sort of things. But it has nothing to do with like, the government X is holds us in a particular way or not. That said, there's been a whole, like just a whole bunch of things. Look at what we wrote last week here. If you go look at New York Times to see the research that was published with Recorded Future, there, Julian Roberts, I think his name is, wrote a great article about the what we've done work on how Chinese PLA, the Chinese Liberation Army, is using AI. Check that out, and seeing like just uncomfortably for them. I think they hated that work,
Hmm.
showing how they're getting ready to use AI from the Chinese side to do these sort of things. So, in terms of stopping actual attacks, there's been just plethora of sort of things over the years where, sometimes again at the very tactical level, where you sort of see an adversary spinning up quote unquote attack infrastructure. Sounds fancy, but spoofing domains, phishing domains, all kinds of different stuff that somebody's spinning up that then defender can go take down sort of thing. So it can go from this sort of strategic, what is our long-term adversary, the Chinese PLA and CPP, what are they, CCP, what are they are up to, versus sort of what is somebody tactically doing to hack Nick and Cena tomorrow type thing. And we do that every day. It's like literally every day that's happening.
Yeah, so you mentioned obviously you have all these cards. So number one, I guess Mastercard buying you, you're still allowed to interact with different industries, different customers. You're not wholly focused on Mastercard activity.
This is a great question. So yes, no, they paid a decent amount of money, 2.65 billion. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
So, and I like my joke has been like, because we've gotten that question from many, as you can imagine, and I like to say that we're good, but we're not $2.65 billion good. If they wanted to use us for just defending themselves, I think they could have done a nice little license agreement that would have slightly cheaper than 2.65 billion. Now, the following question, it's still a good question, so I'm not making fun of your question. The second element would have been, would they tell us go focus only on financial services and retail, because that's their two big or their two big verticals. Not even that. They want us to sort of go as broad as we can and keep building a business here. They're super interested in the government relationships. They want to have Mastercard be a key player on the government side writ large. They sort of you could say, and I'll say this in a good way, that they trade in trust. That
Hmm.
Mastercard works. It's really a trust, and the same thing for the other credit card companies. If you don't trust it, throw it away. It's trust is incredibly important, and that's why cyber hygiene, trust in that my transaction is going to be safe is incredibly important. So hence the government relationships and being part of building trust is very important to them. And then frankly, you know, whereas you might have thought historically about sort of what I'm talking about being sort of financial services and retail, like, okay, if you're a salt mining company, maybe you're not, trading salt on the internet, but it's pretty much everything. has this element to it these days. So no, they want us to be as ambitious as possible, and they already had some assets in cyber, and we're building as clever sort of integrations between those as we ever can, and take it from there.
And it sounds like you focus much more on the enterprise, or governments, right? And the average person today is bombarded by digital threats, as we talked a little while ago. There are scams. I get constant texts about people asking me about the house I'm trying to sell. It's non-ending. Sometimes it actually takes a little bit of analysis to figure out is this real or not. Even when you're like fairly astute to this stuff, the average person probably gets hit, and a lot of these people go after the elderly who have a tougher time in figuring this out. Now, I think industries do protect you from some level, like the Mastercards and credit cards. They have theft protection. So there are agencies out there doing something, but it's not all of it. And I think consumers are still at increasing threats. I'm getting more and more of this stuff. Um, is there Where does this end? I mean, how does this develop over time, especially like you said before, which is terrifying, the idea that reality is going to morph more into what the internet is, and they're going to become one and the same almost.
It's gonna be great,
In
won't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can be today in Boston, and tomorrow I could be in Bali. But the question though is that it seems like the cyber world, the virtual world, is becoming more dangerous and more ambiguous and tough to tell what's real and what's not, and what you can trust. I think that's at the core. You mentioned trust before.
Trust is
It's
so
tough to
important.
know.
Yeah, it's all
It
about
really
trust.
is. I mean, if you think about COVID, it eroded a little bit of the trust that we had in society, because now you can't trust your neighbor, you're going to get me sick. And so we're dealing constant with this attack on trust and misinformation. And yet,
And there are
companies like
these people
record.
who just basically figured out how to, if you think about it, what you mentioned with fraud is so interesting because, at some level, there's sort of a technical aspect of this where sort of companies are trying to make the internet safer in itself, and there's
Mhm,
great work being done. And people like to be harsh on the big tech platforms, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, all these guys, but they do tremendous work on making the core infrastructures better. Now, as they grow and get more surface area, even if they do all that work, they are still, just because of just the sheer size of it, more and more holes are sort of popping into it. And then worse is that as more and more people becomes part of the internet, unfortunately, the sort of the weak links are in this many times humans, not always. There's plenty of weak links in the hardware or software as well. But as humans entering into, you mentioned the elderly, kinds of sort of groups with less abilities, although frankly, lots of times it's highly highly capable people who push the wrong button
mhm.
too. So we shouldn't be too cocky and sort of knock on wood here. We can all push the wrong button, and not just grandma. Beep. And I'm not saying that jokingly. I really mean it. But I think that trust element there is something that the bad guys are taking advantage of. So what you talk about when you see these text messages, it's super interesting. I've been asking our guys to sort of pull on that thread here, and we're doing a lot of work on that right now. There are a lot of people being recruited out of India to come to they were portrayed as sort of startups, as companies in Cambodia, in Laos, in Myanmar, and they come there to do software development work and so on. And once they show up, they hand over their passport for various reasons. They end up being part of these call centers. They're fake call centers, so they're fraud centers, and they may have, whether it's sort of they're working phones or they're working texting, where they're basically running these massively parallel scams across a whole set of people, and people refer to this as pig butchering is sort of the scam. And first you hear that term, you're like, whoa, what the hell does that mean, pig butchering? But it's so, and you get these messages, I get them too. It's like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
What do you care about how I'm doing? Sort of thing.
Mhm.
But the thing is that these guys run this in massively parallel, and you probably also have had to try to have some fun with this. I'm doing great. How are you? Like when you try to take it down some illicit route or whatever, just for the hell of it. But in reality, what these guys are doing is that they're willing to invest a month in building trust,
Mhm.
building fake trust with you, and then eventually take it to a place where they can sort of use this to have you buy Bitcoin, buy gift cards, buy whatever, and then transfer that over to them. And by running this, these scams can end up being very profitable. And it's sort of and you can see now that they're starting to introduce AI on the other end of this. And there's going to be sort of it's not a denial of service attack. It's a massive sort of, I don't know what to call it, but it's an AI enabled parallel fraud attack on society here. And it's going to be super important to try to go after this. And it's difficult, like, to do when you go after cyber threats. Typically, there is sort of very distinct command and control infrastructure that it's carefully hidden, but it can be sought out, and this is sort of one of the things we're really good at here at Record Future. In this world, the infrastructure is very subtle and it's sort of human oriented, and it's much harder to pin down. There's like not an IP address to just kill and get sort of whether
Mhm.
you take it out or you sort of get somebody to do a takedown on it and so on. It's just like they jump to the next computer. It's just like not the point. So it's a very hard thing to deal with, and you're right to bring it up because it's very difficult and very important.
Well, I mean, and you also hear about these deep fakes that you can now do with AI, where you can impersonate somebody, a loved one, you just based on an image on
Yeah.
Facebook of your child, and now you have a recording that shows your child asking for money so that they can be let go by kidnappers or something like that. So again, all
Totally,
of
and this is part of the same sort of, you could see that pig butchering scheme that I talked about, using the same sort of deep fakes, but you can do these in any number of ways, any
yeah.
number of. And as you're technically more than savvy. You're very savvy, so you could imagine yourself sitting down with building AI agents for this. You're in Claude code or whatever they call it, and say, construct a system that unleashes 10,000, blah 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 agents that each one of them do the following, and this is the feedback loop. I want you to work and run controlled experiments. Try it on 10 people, on 100 people, or 1,000 people. It's there's going to be a lot of responsibility on the AI companies to make sure that the AI infrastructure we're using here is not enabling the sort of the bad guys here. I think we launched here earlier in the year a version of what we call our malware intelligence, where we keep tabs on malware of the world. We have the largest sort of collection of that in the world, and part of that is we're very carefully then monitoring now the use of whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI sort of APIs in malware to see, are they taking advantage of that? Are they embedding AI, these sort of small engines in the malware? Are they being used? There's any number of sort of ways that you can imagine that intelligence ends up being very key here, because otherwise we could see AI being used in ways that are just very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying to think, and I'm almost hesitant to ask you this question because I'm terrified of what you might say. But society is built on trust, right? I mean, it's really everything from financial systems, money. We trust that a dollar has a certain value today and it'll have a certain value tomorrow, and I can use it to purchase whatever it is that I want. Borders are built on trust, and they're built on social constructs that you and I decide that this is the boundary of my property and this is where yours start, and it'll be the same way tomorrow. So much about how we operate as a society and individuals within those societies and nations is built on trust. And it feels like everything is attacking trust right now.
Yeah,
Um,
no, no, you're right, and that's why, like, we call it sort of the threat convergence. Again, we like to talk about this, and again, what's been going on in the Middle East here between cyber and war and disinformation, and it's not always the three components at the same time. But if you put on your malicious mind and think about how could I really put to work, the sort of the tool sets out there to go at a country. How do I, Russia, when they invade a country, have historically always done these sort of DDoS attacks, denial of service attacks on the banks to sort of take down the bank websites
Mm.
the night before invasions as sort of being stupidly sort of predictable modus operandus. Why not just do it the same sort of attack, but on trust of the banks to create runs on the banks before I go invade somebody to really to go at sort of, and there's many ways of sort of the trust erosion that can be, and it can be slow, it can be fast, it can be, lots of different, like any number of ways of this. The black swan scenarios here are uncomfortable, so for sure.
Well, yeah, from that perspective, I guess those swan scenarios, I'm sure there are all kinds of think tanks and pundits and experts and researchers in this field. What exactly, how are they talking about this attack on trust in society? And obviously, organizations and people like you are working to fight that, but there seems to be an endless supply of people trying to erode that trust. How does this play out over the next 5 or 10 years from your perspective?
Look, I've obviously sat here and talked, and it feels like I'm being a fearmonger at some level, and I'm sure it sounds like I am. But at the same time, look, humanity has gotten through a lot. We took ourselves through the bubonic plague, and it worked out. Like we've done a lot of, we've tried to make, you know, we started the First World War, we started the Second World War, we blew up atomic bombs, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, and actually we came out on the good side of it. Uh, the so we may talk about that it's terrible that the internet has sort of done some bad things. At the same time, this globalization wave, as much as people don't love globalization, that saw vast amount of people in Asia come out of poverty, and instead of being hungry every day, actually having a job, and so lots of goodness have come out of that, and even if it's getting people out of hunger in Asia, that might actually have elevated economies in the U.S. as well. So look, I actually sort of huge believer in all of this. Um, we, I, I'm less technology plays a role, and intelligence is one very important part of this. In many ways, I do think that the good news here is that it's more about humans. We need to make sure that we are, uh, you know. Teach our kids what it needs to be skeptical. I must say I'm pretty thrilled about seeing my kids about how they question. It feels like they sometimes question things better than some adults,
Hmm.
I had the discussion with my daughter the other day about sort of like, and she was showing me this great chart. I think it was from the Pew Research Institute of the box of sort of trusted sources versus non. And I immediately, there was sort of like, and I think they trusted New York Times a little bit more than Fox, but both of them were in the quadrant. And I'm like, so why do you think they put this one versus the other? And again, the Cambridge guy versus the whatever other guy is going to get all upset about that. But it's this sort of, and but and some of those answers are probably too simple, but I'm actually pretty optimistic about what how our kids are going to come out and be smarter than the guy in our generation sitting there doom scrolling. So that's sort of, there is an element of that. I think we need to spend more time teaching this in school, and it's not about teaching what source is good or bad. It's actually teaching how to question things, how do you understand things, how do you take it apart, how do you use the tools to your advantage here. And it's sort of the basics. Uh, teach people Voltaire rather than that click on a certain button. Teach the sort of the basics of philosophy or what have you. So no, I guess I'm pretty optimistic. I don't think this idea of and this is where again when we start saying let's have at a governmental level filter out what's disinformation and not, dude, that has we that is just, that takes you to a dark place every time you try.
Hmm.
Whether you're sort of communist or fascist, it doesn't really matter. When you start filtering at the society level and saying my side of the equation is better than the other, that is, whether you're Karl Marx and Stalin or Lenin versus your Hitler and Mussolini or whatever, it goes dark very, very fast. So
Hmm.
no, let's teach ourselves to be smart and questioning, and and I am pretty optimistic where that's going actually.
It's interesting because it's a double-edged sword because people are using AI for misinformation. And everything you said, I completely agree. With my kids, we make sure that they try to be as analytical and introspective and curious as possible. But AI at the same time is making it so that people are less curious, right? Because I don't need to go and do the research. I don't need to read Voltaire. I can go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, tell me the things I need to know about Voltaire to write this paper." And actually, in fact, why don't you just write the paper for me?
Exactly. It's sad, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
it's
I think this is where then teachers need to come along, and
yeah.
instead of saying writing a paper about Voltaire, say, write a paper about, that understands, I don't know, encourage people to use AI. If you want to use AI, please do so, but tell me how the use of AI impacted your paper writing. I don't know, just like dive deeper, dive deeper. We have
Hmm.
to kind of go back now to you sort of opened up to that question earlier, the genius out of the bottle here. And I think, to go geopolitical on you again, the good news, I was at a dinner here recently in Boston. It was Axios had arranged a dinner. It was some great thinkers on AI, but they went down this path of, look, we need to have guardrails around this and this and this and that, and you could just see it get into a point where it's like, let's give up on AI and give it all to China and adopt using DeepSeek, and it's gonna be great.
Uh-huh.
Be celebrating Chinese holidays before the
Yeah.
day is over. And I was like, look, and these were some smart people going down this path, like some high, they're teaching kids in university. And I'm like, you guys are delusional.
Uh-huh.
This is sort of where we are now. There's 3 or 4 companies in the US, OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and a few others who are very good at this. And it's only them who can pull it off. The US government cannot pull this off. That's important. U.S. government has always sort of been at the forefront of pretty much all tech. They can't pull that off on their own now. And then there's a bunch of Chinese companies. There are no Russian companies who can do this. There, maybe Mistral in France. There are no British companies, no German companies, certainly no Swedish companies, no Israeli companies, no Indian companies. So it's a winner takes it all between two here. Potentially, whether it doesn't necessarily, it's a non-zero chance,
Hmm.
non-zero, what do you call it? Non-zero percent probability that there is a winner takes it all, and we need to make sure that that is with us. And in that part, when it's with us, how do we then teach ourselves and be the best at this? Because having our own AI that is sort of, whether it's written by Google or OpenAI or what have you, or hopefully competing between a few, versus having DeepSeek doing this. And you ask me, tell me about Xi Jinping, and it says, how about if we instead talk about science? Like, no, I want to ask questions about Xi Jinping.
Uh-huh.
Like, that future is dark.
Yeah.
It's dark, dark, dark. When the AI has to sort of adopt to Chinese socialist values, not a good thing. Not a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's that saying? It says, uh, what is it? It's something along the lines of like, good times make for soft men make for weak men make for hard times, and hard times make for strong men. Uh, it's when I think about people that are super idealistic trying to put the genie back in, or saying like we should put guardrails, I just also think, I'm like, I don't know what world you're living in, but that's completely unrealistic, and not only unrealistic, it's dangerous, right? If enough people believe in what you're saying and start making policy around that, it's ultra dangerous for the United States and countries that think the way that we do.
Totally. I think it's like trying to regulate the airline industry a la 1907 when the Wright brothers came along, or 1908, was it? Imagine we regulated airplanes a la 1910 and
Hmm.
said they have to have, like paper wings. They have
Yeah,
to have, like you just, it's just not, it's to your point. It's not just stupid. It's also dumb and
yeah.
dangerous. Yeah.
So, Christopher, this has been tremendous, and I can talk about this for hours, but you've been so generous with time. And I just want to ask you one more question, which is a singular question that if I had one question to ask Christopher, it would be this. You have a rare perspective, watching global digital threats unfold in real time while also building systems that counter them. So, with that vantage point, what's one truth about how modern threats work or how we respond to them that most people don't see but probably should?
So it's a difficult question to unpack because there's not a single simple answer to that. But the key thing is that modern threats are complex. It's sort of a non-comment, but it's important. It is multifactorial. You can't really sort of do first principles thinking and just reduce them to one component. Um, there's pretty much always, even if we talk about AI, at least to this point, there are humans behind the threats. There might be a criminal behind the threat, the guy, a boy in the mom's basement in Yekaterinburg, sort of thing. There could be a whole intelligence agency behind it. You might work at a place, whether it's a government agency or at a company, where there's 500 people in a department at PLA office outside Shanghai, whose only mission in life is to get your into your system, and
Hmm.
they're willing to wait 5 years to make it happen. So there are humans behind, and they're willing to use very complex approaches. They might be using a combination of computer approaches, physical approaches. They're willing to, over this 3 to 5 year time frame, get insiders into your company, recruiting people, getting what we've seen with North Koreans, getting IT workers in all kinds of different places to both make money on the IT worker, but also having people embedded in these companies with system access. So the threats are complex. They're moving across all these dimensions we've talked about. We talked about the sort of the conversions between cyber and kinetic war type things, but this physical is probably the right word, and misinformation, disinformation, information operations, what have you. So it's complex, and so in that, navigating that means that you have to be very thoughtful and think about this. And if you're defending, whether it's sort of a big company or a big government organization with lots of resources, or it's a very small outfit, a little nonprofit that has high profile, or what have you, or even thinking about yourself, we have to be very thoughtful in this. So it's complex. I think that's all I can say. It's complex.
It sounds like it. It sounds overwhelming, in fact. But Christopher, it's been a privilege. You're a longtime friend, and so I'm so excited to catch up with you, and looking forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much for being on Natural Selection, and congratulations on all the work that you've done so far.
Thank you so much, sir. Great fun. Thank you.
That was Christopher Ahlberg. Now, Unnatural Signals.
Christopher reframes security as a problem of perception. The old approach was defensive. Build walls, wait for impact. But in an environment that changes this fast, reaction is already too late. What Recorded Future does differently is listen at scale. By scanning global data continuously, patterns appear early, long before an attack becomes visible. Here, intelligence is the moat. Not just what you know, but how quickly you can act on it. The faster the feedback loop, the more control you have. And what's more striking is how digital signals bleed into the physical world. Cyber indicators now precede supply chain failures, market shifts, even geopolitical events. The boundary between online and offline competition has collapsed. Advantage belongs to those who see the signal first.
Thanks for listening to Unnatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.